Good afternoon, everybody. It's planning time for this meeting on the 4th of October. Can I remind everybody who's attending remotely that they need to keep their camera on at all times, otherwise you won't be able to vote. And we have no public speaking at this meeting, so that hopefully the applications will be relatively straightforward. Before I go to the agenda, I'm Councillor Phil Murphy, Chair of the Planning Committee, and officers, can you introduce yourselves, please, Craig?
Hello, I'm Craig O'Connor, Head of Planning for Monmouthshire County Council.
Joe?
Good afternoon, I'm Joanne Chase, Solicitor to the Planning Committee today.
I'm Richard Williams from Democratic Services.
County Councillor Dale Rook, and I'm the Vice Chair.
Andrew Jones, Development Management Area Team Manager.
Philip Thomas, Development Services Manager.
Thank you for that. Do we have any apologies for absence? Richard?
Yes, Chair, apologies from Councillor Eason.
Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest? Can't imagine, but no, okay. Can I have a proposition for the accuracy of the minutes of the previous meeting? Anne? Did anybody second that, Ben? Thank you. No matters arising from that? No? Okay, thanks very much. We'll go straight on now then to the to item 4, which is the applications before us today. We have two main applications, and the third one is one from last time coming back, which we'll deal with at the end of the meeting. So the first application is DM 2021-01950, the proposed constructions of a standalone nursery unit, access path and use of off-site existing car park area to be used as a parent drop-off pick-up facility at Trellock Primary School. And Andrew, you're presenting this one?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. So you've just outlined then the development description before us. So I'll just clarify that the application is presented to committee this afternoon as it's made by Monmouthshire County Council, and it would be on MCC land. The nursery building would be, and furthermore, there is an objection from Trellock United Community Council. So you should see on screen now shortly the presentation slide. So that gives you the wider context there. That's the Trellock Primary School located in the centre of your screen. And you can see then on the next slide a breakdown of development. So the area at the most northerly point, edged in red, is the car park that's to be used in conjunction. So this parcel of land is currently owned by Edenstone Homes and will be used in agreement with the school for the parking provision. Within the blue line boundary, you can see there is the red line of the proposed nursery building. And the dedicated outdoor play area then edged in green. It's a useful point of reference then at the bottom of the drawing you will see the location of the community centre building where the nursery currently operates from. So just turning to the next slide. So this is the proposed new purpose-built nursery building. So it measures 11 metres in width, 18.7 metres in length, and would stand 5 metres to the ridge. Finished with render, and you can also see there on the gable ends in the apex there some elements of timber cladding, and also solar PV panels would be mounted to the southerly roof plane. And just turning to the next slide. So these, obviously some of the members would have had the benefit of site visit yesterday, but it's a school, it's a fairly well-known site. So this is a view from Roman Way, which is to the west of the site, the school site. And turning then just to the next slide. This is the main access into the school from the B4293, which leads into the sort of parking area, existing parking area you can see there in the distance. This shows the existing car park area within the school grounds. The dedicated spaces on the left, and other cars have parked along the right up to the pavement. So this photograph here shows the school grounds. You can see there's a red arrow that sort of gives an approximate location then of where this proposed building will go. Obviously, that was a bit more clearer really on the site plan we saw earlier. And then the next slide, this is a slightly older photograph here. You members on site yesterday will have noted that the pedestrian linkway and gate feature is now in situ from the car parking area that connects it to the school site, and that's a locked gate that links the two. So I believe that's the last of our slides. So I think probably in terms of the officer's assessment, just a slight bit of background. Say the nursery currently operates from the community centre building to the south, which that facility has capacity for 24 children, although generally they will only typically take 19 children at one time, but that is the capacity. And that currently includes 4 members of staff, but this could raise to a maximum of 6, depending on number of children. It's worth pointing out at this stage that there's no plans to expand the capacity of the nursery enterprise as a result of this purpose-built new structure. So firstly, just touching on the principle of the development and a new nursery building in principle. Such a facility would fall within the definition of a community facility that's defined within policy S5 of the adopted local development plan. And this policy sets out that new facilities within or adjoining town and village development boundaries would be acceptable subject to detailed planning considerations. And in this instance, the build is within the development boundary of Trellick, which is designated as a main village within the LDP strategy. So turning to those detailed planning considerations, and firstly, visual impact. The new building, as you'll have seen from the plans on the slide, is of a modest single-storey scale and form, and is sited in close proximity to the main school building and grouped together quite neatly. The building would employ a very simple palette of materials that would complement the existing school building, and as you've seen on the drawings also, that the provision of solar PV panels to be mounted on the southern roof slope is also welcomed. And whilst it is noted that the building would occupy part of the existing school playing field, considerable open space would be retained for use by the pupils at the primary school for outdoor play and outdoor learning opportunities. The local community council, as you will have seen, have raised concerns with the parking provision and potential increase in traffic congestion, although they do caveat their comments that they offer no objection in principle to the nursery. So as noted earlier, the car park to the north of the school site is owned by Edenstone Homes and would be used in conjunction with the new nursery building, and an agreement has been reached between parties for this. So whilst officers do acknowledge the concerns of the Community Council, the operating times of the primary school and the proposed nursery unit are staggered, and therefore the Council's highways engineers have agreed that there are no grounds to sustain an objection. Pedestrian access, which is now in situ, would link the car park to the existing school site, and it's worth making the point that the day-to-day management of the parking arrangement and the allocation of parking spaces, for example, for staff parking, is outside of the planning remit, and that is a matter of management for those part of the nursery and part of the school. So from a highways perspective, it's considered that this proposal would accord with the relevant policy MV1 of the LDP. Other material considerations are addressed in detail in the officer's report, but just of note and of particular reference is that in terms of any third-party impact, residential amenity impact that is, the proposed building is approximately 29 metres from the nearest dwelling. And given the context of the building within the school group, it's not considered that this new unit would give rise to unacceptable noise or disturbance. And it's also worth noting that there were no third-party objections to the proposal. So in conclusion, the officers have considered this carefully with consultees, and subject to the conditions as detailed in your officer's report, it's presented to you this afternoon with a recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And Jane, you're the local member. Can those who wish to speak after Jane use the hands up facility, please? Jane.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Andrew, for your presentation. I speak on behalf of both myself and my fellow ward member, Councillor Richard John, in that we both welcome this application within the village of Trelech. The modern, purpose-built building will be a welcome upgrade to the current building that is being used at the Babington Centre. It will be of great benefit to local families, not just within Trelech, but also the wider catchment, by giving them better access to nursery provision and affordable childcare. I note that there were no objections by local residents to this application, and it has been brought forward to Planning Committee today because it is a MonCC-owned site. Trelech Primary School is very fortunate that it has lots of green open space around it, and the site can be quite easily accommodate this building and its play area without having a detrimental impact on play provision and access to green outdoor space for its pupils, or a detrimental visual impact to the village and its residents. I also feel that having the nursery and the school on the same site is beneficial for the transition from nursery into foundation phase and Key Stage 1. Furthermore, there is added benefit to parents if they have both nursery and primary school-aged children, because it makes accessing one site far easier and quicker than accessing two sites. I do note that a comment has been raised by Trelech United Community Council with regards to parking. However, this has been mitigated by creating additional parking and having staggered start and finish times. And I'm sure that surrounding community and residents will know that if they choose to live in an area that is in close proximity to a school, that twice a day, for a very short period of time, the traffic and ease of parking will be slightly increased. I hope that if granted today, the nursery provision will be able to grow in numbers, which in turn will provide more accessible childcare provision and employment within the area. Yesterday, we looked at the Babington Centre on our site visit, and it was evident that a 21st century purpose-built building would be an asset by way of sustainability with its solar panels, something which, with today's energy crisis, I'm sure will be very welcome to a small business. I accept that what I'm about to say next isn't actually a planning consideration, but a further benefit to the nursery and the community is the fact that things like tables, chairs, all play equipment, arts and crafts, etc., will no longer have to be put away after each session, meaning that the Busybodies nursery will have somewhere they can settle and truly call home. The Babington Centre can then be freed up for more community and church activities throughout the day. Further to this, I feel that from a safeguarding point of view, the site will be much safer for both children and staff, being on a secure, gated and fenced site. With bearing all the aforementioned points in mind, Councillor Richard John and myself wholeheartedly support this application, and we hope that it is approved for the benefit of the local children in Trelech and its surrounding areas today. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And yes, most of us were there on site yesterday. I think one of the things that struck me about the fact that there's designated parking for this now was the fact that they won't have people parking on the road to drop their children off at the Babington Centre. So that's a distinct advantage. So the first on my list is Councillor Bin. Emma?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to inquire if there would be provision for secure bike parking for non-standard bikes on site. Thank you.
Andrew?
The provision of specific designated areas for bike parking is not shown on the plans before us. I have to check, but the likelihood is that wouldn't require any form of permission or planning consent from us for that space to be allocated. In terms of how the areas are sort of formally marked up. So it's not detailed as any specific area on the plans as it stands, but the provision of a sort of designated bike parked area wouldn't be something that would need to come back to us formally in any event.
It would have to be very small anyway, wouldn't it?
Sorry,
Tiny little bikes.
I know traffic is a cause for concern for many. So if there is designated bike parking, then if you can reduce the number of the traffic, and it would be a good idea to have bike parking to invite people to use bikes.
Yes, thank you for that. Councillor Pell, Maureen.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I agree with this proposal. I think it is very much better to have a nursery provision close to the primary school. We've seen how well it's worked at places like Llanfoist, who have the similar type of thing. It makes it easier for the parents when they've got children of different ages to drop them off. It's not such a shock to them when they move from nursery to primary school, as they've been seeing the other children. Even if they're in a different playground, they can see the other children playing. And as they've got the designated car park as well, and we were told that that gate, once the dropping off time is finished, that gate will be locked and then unlocked again in the afternoon when they fetch them, which means more security, which we do need in our schools, sadly. And I think it's a great proposition, and I support it wholeheartedly.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Carrard, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor McKenna kind of said certainly my feelings that it looks like a really good scheme and we should support it. I had a question for the officers, which was, do we know the size of the solar array on the roof? Just from the drawings that we saw there, it looked like most of the roof was empty with a tiny little line of solar panels across the top.
I haven't got the specifics to hand on in terms of the sort of electricity capacity, unless that's in the supporting documents, which just bear with me one moment. I don't think I've got details of the sort of provision of electricity that will be supplied by that. I mean, in any event, I know that it is within the context of the roof plane appear to be quite a small array, but non-domestic dwellings do enjoy permitted development rights under Part 43. So if in the future more PV panels were to be constructed on the roof, it's possible that that could be done under permitted development as a non-domestic building under Part 43 in any event. Also, the building has been designed, the PV array is designed for the needs of that building. If there was opportunities, and I agree, we can encourage it. There's learning opportunities in terms of renewable energy for pupils with that. But it looks if the building's been designed with its own needs in mind, any subsequent for a larger array may need planning permission, but they would have the benefit of a fairly generous permitted development rights if they needed to increase that capacity in the future.
Okay, thanks. I just kind of add then as a note to say that development looks great, but there's a huge, great roof there. It's got a lovely aspect, so maximising our energy generation from our rooftops is a really, really good thing. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Councillor Howells, Marion.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, yeah, it's a great thing to see a school or a nursery right next door to a primary school. It really does ease that transition for the youngsters as they move on to the big school sort of thing. My question would really, is it sort of future-proof? I mean, the capacity at the moment you say is 19, and it's or the intake at the moment is 19 with a capacity of 24. Is that sort of sufficient for the needs of Trelech, really? Is there a known baby boom in that area? 24 doesn't seem to be an awful lot. What's the intake on the primary school?
I mean, I haven't got the intake on the primary school details, but what is within the supporting documents that the nursery have advised is that there is no plans to increase the capacity, so this would be a sort of a like-for-like transfer of the sort of maximum of 24 children at any one time. If there was a population increase or demand increased, then they'd have to return potentially in the future with subsequent applications to extend the building. But as it's before us today, it's very much a like-for-like provision of a max of 24 children and max of 6 staff members.
Thank you.
Okay, before I go to Councillor Garrett, I noticed it's just been pointed out to me, Jill, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Some of the things have been said already, and I was going to ask, and I think it's just been put on the chat as well, about the heat source pump, whether there's any, is it in any way as a the planning we can encourage perhaps rainwater collection, any other sort of, I know that's superficial and can be done later, but any other perhaps use for gardening or whatever in the future, anything we can do to encourage young people, even at nursery stage, to be thinking more environmentally, and also whether it's heated by the solar panels or whether it is a ground source heat pump. And the other thing I wanted to ask was, or we discussed yesterday, I think, by the way, I think this is a really good idea, is about not defining the times of the use. I know it's been put on by the officers that we might want to do that as a condition, but we discussed yesterday, exactly as Marion says, there might be some increase in use in the future, young people or children, and therefore they'd have flexibility to be able to increase the number of pupils and the number of sessions they might run. So can we not necessarily have a condition of the times, please?
Okay, thanks for that. Do you want to come back?
Yeah, I'll come back. Yeah, thanks. Those are excellent points there. In terms of potential for air, ground source heat pumps, whatever it might be, there isn't at present stage the policy levers for us to insist upon those as part of a development and making it accord with either national or our LDP. So we can encourage, we can promote, but as it stands, say the provision of the PV panels is welcomed, but there aren't those policies that we would need to hang off such a requirement. Unfortunately, at this stage, certainly moving forward with the next LDP, hopefully we will have more teeth to sort of insist on those sort of things. Also, there was discussion yesterday about the opening hours of the nursery unit. If members, it's suggested there in condition 3, obviously it's before members to, in some cases, amend conditions, or if their resolution was to approve without the imposition of that condition, then that's members' gift this afternoon to do so. I think there was discussion that would restrict it for wider, perhaps evening community uses, for example, and making use of the new facility. So that's that's the officer recommendation with that condition. But like I said, it's within your gift today, if minded to approve, that condition either be amended or removed as part of your resolution.
Thanks, Andrew. Councillor Garrett, Steve?
Well, yeah, my comment was basically following up from Councillor Caddard and Councillor Bond about the energy, the environmental credentials of the building and the ground source heat pump potential. I was in Devorden on the weekend, and there's a development there. No PVA panels. There's ground dug up, but no sign of any ground source heat pumps. And I know we haven't got the teeth yet, but as a council, we need to be promoting this. You know, COP26, despite what's going on with the environment and all the challenges we face, but that are affecting it, we need to be promoting these, and hopefully our new LDP will do that. But yeah, ground source heat pumps would have been a thought as to being included. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Bonfield, Faye.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I would agree with all the other members when you say that the transition from nursery to primary school makes it easier when the nursery is on site. I would also agree with Councillor Bond that we don't put any opening hour restrictions on, so that they can operate further sessions if and when needed.
Okay, thanks for that. Got nobody else indicating that they want to speak, so we'll go to the vote on it. Is it the general wish, just have a show of stick your hand in the air that we look at this with the removal of that particular condition. I think everybody, on screen, okay. So we're all right with that. Okay, well, we've got, hang on a minute, I got another message up. Oh, it's just a comment there. Thank you for that, Jan. We've got the officer recommendation for approval. Can I have somebody, Ben and Anne? Thank you. Richard, can we have the voting facility up, please? Can you vote now then, please?
So that's been carried.
Thank you, Joe. We move on now then to the next item before us, which is application DM 2022-00395, a new two-storey extension to the side of the property to provide annex accommodation at 1 Pipistrel Court, Llanfoist. And Andrew, this one's yours again.
It is, yes, thank you again, Chair. So, yeah, this is a householder application. And just to confirm for members this afternoon, as this is a householder application, this is presented to you this afternoon at the request of the previous ward member for the Llanfoist ward. That was Councillor Giles Howard. So I'll just take you through the slides now to start. So this is the application site. You can see it's sort of within the built-up form of the village of Llanfoist. That's the red line boundary you can see on screen. So this is the existing layout. So this is within, as part of a very recent development to bring the former village school into residential use, and also for the construction of 2 dwellings to the rear. So this is one of those new dwellings. So the dwelling is set sort of back into the plot, with its garden primarily to the side and the front, and you can see there's outline then of a garage to the front as well. But that's the existing layout. Just moving through the slides. So this is the dwelling. It's a 2-storey detached dwelling in its current guise. That is it as it stands in situ. Those are the existing floor plans. Was there's some space then in the attic provision. So this is the proposed site and roof plan. So it's the extension would be sited on the northwesterly side of the dwelling. If in terms of its makeup, then if we turn to the next slide, you can see there it's set down from the ridge. There's a small single-storey wraparound that comes along the frontage and partly down the side elevation, with the first floor windows are provided via dormer to the front and back. There are, just to be clear on that northwest elevation, there's no new window or door openings proposed on that new gable end. It's, as you can see there, it's set down from the existing main ridge line. So just quickly go through the rest of the drawings, the floor plans. So this is the proposal. So it would still be one residential unit. This is the reason it's come forward is to provide some ancillary accommodation for a family member. But the point really is that it remains one planning unit. Just going through the photographs. So this is the gable from which the extension would project. You can see the dwelling there in its current guise as reflected on those drawings. You can see this is taken further back into the site towards the main road. You can see central to that photograph is the neighbouring property, which we'll discuss later, which is known as Tamarisk. If we just go to the next photo, that'll probably show that in a little better context. You can see here, particularly in the photograph on the right, there's a stone boundary wall between the properties. Again, I'll come back to that wall later in the presentation. That's the context of where the extension would go. And I believe that's the end of the slides. So, in terms of the consideration and the material planning considerations in the office report, a detailed overview is provided in there. So, I was going to focus the presentation on three of the key material planning considerations of this application, those being visual impact, residential amenity, and biodiversity. So firstly, with regards to visual impact, officers consider that the proposed extension is sensibly designed to read as a secondary and subordinate addition to the original dwelling. And whilst the proposal would provide 2 floors of space, the use of dormer windows to the front and rear do reduce the massing of the extension, which is set approximately 1 metre below the main ridge. A small single-storey element, as I noted earlier, would wrap around the front and partially to the side of the extension, and external finishes proposed would complement those of the existing dwelling. And as such, having regard to design visual impact considerations, officers are satisfied that the design solution proposed would accord with the relevant criteria within policy DES 1 of the adopted LDP. Turning then to the second of the issues I outlined, and this being third-party residential amenity, the primary consideration impact would be on the former school building at the front of what was the original development site, and also to the property to the west known as Tamarisk, which we saw earlier in the photographs. And for members that were on site, we visited this property yesterday and looked from their rear garden. So firstly, in respect of the former school building, the first floor dormer window that would be positioned in the front elevation would be positioned approximately 11 metres from the boundary between these properties, and in terms of building to building distances, this would exceed the sort of standard 21 metre window to window distances that we would seek for any form of development with regards to privacy standards. And as such, on that basis, it's not considered that the proposal would have an unacceptable impact on the privacy standards of this neighbour. And just for the sake of clarity, whilst there is a dormer window proposed in the rear of the extension, there is no neighbouring property directly behind the site. So turning to the property known as Tamarisk, I think it's firstly important to clarify that whilst concerns that are understood have been expressed and raised with regards to the structural integrity of the stone wall between the dwellings, this would not be a material planning consideration. The foundation details of the proposed extension would be a matter for technical consideration under the building control regime, and whilst owing to the proximity of the building to the boundary wall, any requirements to enter into a party wall agreement would be a private civil matter between the interested parties. So turning to the issue of distances between Tamarisk and the proposed extension, the residents of Tamarisk have commissioned their own survey that shows that the closest rear corner of their property would be 10.35 metres to the proposal, whilst the rear of the extension would be 12.6 metres to Tamarisk. Turning to the distance of the extension to the boundary wall, since our visit yesterday, we have sought clarity from the architects, Morgan and Horowski, who have confirmed that in terms of the distance of the extension to the boundary wall, that this would be 3.62 metres at the front and 1.97 metres at the back, with the closest point to any wall, part of the wall, i.e. the buttress, would be 1 metres. So having regard to these distances, officers are of the view that having consideration of the neighbouring dwelling Tamarisk, that this is set in an elevated position compared to the application site, which would lessen any overbearing impact. And also that the rear elevation of Tamarisk does not face directly towards the side elevation, and is angled away, as we'll have seen perhaps best on the site plan. and their rear elevation faces towards in a southeasterly direction, which perhaps is illustrated best. On the site plan, there we go. So having regard to both the topography and the orientation of the dwellings, this would mean that the proposal would maintain reasonable levels of privacy and amenity for the occupiers of the neighbouring properties. Turning then to the third issue that I mentioned, which is ecology and biodiversity interest, ecological surveys that were undertaken during the original planning application to develop the site highlighted that the northwest boundary provided an important feature to the site due to its use as a commuting corridor for bats. And indeed, the original plan submitted for this application did result in the council's own ecologist stating that the proposals had not sufficiently demonstrated that it would retain the dark corridor along the northwestern boundary, which is clearly an important ecological feature of the site. So following this, a window to the side elevation of the extension has been removed, and further soft landscaping, including the addition of 4 new trees, is now provided. And as a result of those amendments, both Natural Resources Wales and the council's own in-house ecologists have confirmed that this would overcome their previous concerns. So subject to conditions would include the control of lighting, the implementation of the additional soft landscaping, and also of the ecological enhancements. Officers are satisfied that the development would accord with the requirements of policy NE1 of the LDP that relates to biodiversity. So in conclusion, members, the application has been subject to considerable discussion and amendment with officers and our consultees, including both NRW and our in-house ecologist. And subject to those conditions you find in your officer's report, is presented to you this afternoon with a recommendation to approve. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. And this is in your ward, Ben. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation, Andrew. It was very thorough. This is locally a bit of a tricky application. While I sympathise with the applicant's requirement for more accommodation in their house, changing it from a 5-bedroom house to a 6-bedroom house with some additional living space. There has been local opposition to this, and Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerychwraig Fawr Community Council has also opposed this scheme. There are really, I think, two reasons why we shouldn't approve this development. The main one, and I think something we all saw yesterday, those that were there, was how close this extension is going to be to the neighbouring property, Tamarisk. It's going to be, as we heard in that, slightly less than 2 metres from the boundary wall. And do you know the height from the ridge? And Andrew, I'd guess I think it was around just over 7 metres off the top of my head.
I did have these measurements earlier. If you just bear with me a moment, Councillor,
okay.
I'll get those for you.
I'll continue anyway. And I know it's set down, but really, all you're going to get if you are in the rear of Tamarisk and looking out of the windows in Tamarisk is you're going to be looking straight at a very large wall. So I think it's going to have a significant impact, certainly on that neighbour and the person who lives in the school. They're also going to be impacted from their view. The second consideration is the bat corridor. Now, I completely acknowledge what NRW and MonCC's biodiversity officers have said. However, I would say that sticking a 2-storey extension straight in the middle of a bat corridor, even if it does have lighting controls, is not going to encourage the local bat population. It may be that these bodies have assessed the level of detriment to animals and realised that they consider it acceptable. But I think it's something that we should consider. And I mean, the name of the little close, Pipistrel Court, kind of gives that away a bit. So I do think that this development is too big, and I would encourage my committee members to vote to reject it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Andrew, did you come up with that figure?
Just waiting for the measuring tool to load. So if other members would like to address, I'll come back to that point.
We'll carry on. Councillor Riley, Sue.
Hi, thanks, Chair. We've heard that there are clearly concerns from an ecological perspective. And we've heard that there is mitigation in the form of 4 trees extra to be planted. I think we're aware that trees were supposed to be planted before and haven't been. So is there a time scale within which we would expect that mitigation to be in place?
Yeah, if members want to continue, I'll come back in one rather than chipping back in. I'll come back in one go, if that's okay.
We'll go through. Councillor Payne, Emma.
Thank you, Chair. Can you please clarify the issues that resulted in the original developer receiving fines for non-compliance don't need to be made good before further development takes place on the site? Thank you.
Okay, we'll come back on that one as well. Councillor Powell?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just want to pick on one thing. When we were at the house next door, it doesn't look directly at the side of it. You've got to turn your head to do that. The actual windows of his look straight into those trees in his garden. So it's not a direct view of the one next door. That's all I wanted to bring up, just so people understand that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously when we were on site yesterday, we heard about this sort of complex past history of the site, but any sort of disputes and things are just that, and they're not something for us to consider at today's meeting, and therefore shouldn't cloud our sort of judgment when we make our decision on this. I noticed at the site visit, as you face the property, the dwelling that is to the east, so the right-hand side, actually has a lean-to garage on it. So by adding a lean-to onto this property that we're looking at today, that will sort of become in keeping. I do admit that it is slightly bigger than what the garage is, but again, it will be in keeping with that neighbouring property. You know, the biodiversity team within MonCC have looked at this, and I'm satisfied that if they're satisfied that things have been met through soft lighting, landscape, etc., then that is sufficient. You know, you look at the size of a bat, what's it going to be? Probably no more than 30 centimetres with its wingspan. You know, if you've got a couple of metres there, it's got plenty of room to go through if it needs to. So, you know, I'm happy that back corridor isn't going to be affected. And, you know, you were talking about sort of the 21 metres distance and the privacy standards. You know, these are obviously guidance, as my understanding, not actually law. And therefore, you know, I'm happy with the officer's decision with regards to the orientation of the building and the topography. And as we've discussed many times before, nobody actually has that legal right to a view as well. So I'm minded to go with the officer's recommendation of this of approval. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. And yes, I certainly picked up on all of those points, and the fact that if it is approved, it would be a much better looking building in the location than the current one is. It's rather plain. But Councillor Bond, you want to come in, Jill?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. Very comprehensive. And something that was said, Andrew, in there about the technical consideration about the neighbour, that is particularly concerning me about, because it is elevated and it is totally dependent, or we were led to believe it's totally dependent on that wall and the integrity of that wall for their patio, their garden, and in fact possibly their house then if it was subsidence or whatever. So can we make it, you said it would come out in technical, can we make it any stronger than, can we put anything at this stage and raise that issue, please?
Andrew, you're ready with the other points? You can bring up that one as well. It's a building control issue, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, perhaps I'll start with that. No, there isn't. We can't really take it further forward in terms of, I'm thinking perhaps the use of planning conditions. We should only be using those and applying those and for that level of information where it's within planning's remit to do so. We shouldn't be conditioning and trying to control things that sit outside of our remit. So that would relate to both the structural integrity of that wall and potentially the requirements to doing any works in proximity to that wall, as I said in the presentation, would need to be subject potentially to the provisions of the Party Wall Act, where parties would need to enter into that. So other than advising of those points, that's as far as we can pursue those.
Can we put it down as an advisory?
The officer's report, generally where there's any works close to the boundary, officer decision notices will include what we call an informative, an advice note that the provisions of the Party Wall Act may be applicable. It is the responsibility onus on those involved then to pursue that. That's not a matter that we are the enforcing or administrating body of, but it is simply to flag that as a potential issue because these works are close to the boundary. Just to come back, I'll loop back then to some of the points made by the ward member. So I've just used our online measuring tool so that we can scale from the plans. So the proposed extension using that would be 7.6 metres to the ridge, 4.1 metres to the eaves. There was a comment also made with regards to timescales of planting to ensure that not only they agreed but they're actually delivered, and that's an excellent point. There is a condition there that all hard and soft landscaping works to be carried out in accordance with a reasonable standard, and the work should be carried out prior to occupation of any part of the development or in accordance with a timetable to be agreed. So there is a condition, that's condition 6, and there's also, on top of that, condition 7, which requires a landscape maintenance program for a minimum of 5 years. So should any of those 4 trees that are being sought as mitigation fail, then there is that safeguard that that can be replanted and revisited, so they wouldn't be lost if, for whatever reason, in those early years, they didn't establish. Concerns related to the developer and their compliance with the original plans. There is an ongoing case between Natural Resources Wales and the original developer. That's a matter that is going through its own prosecution route. In terms of that process impacting our ability to determine this planning application, this application does need to be considered on its own merits. The dark corridor has been considered by both NRW and our in-house ecologist, and whilst they were concerned with the original proposal, those amendments and that alternate planting is considered acceptable, and their advice to us as competent professional ecologists is that the impact is acceptable and that the concerns they had based on the original plans has been overcome by removing a window to the side gable, by providing additional soft landscaping, and also the condition would remove permitted development rights in respect of any lighting as well. So as I've recalled this wrong, one of the members has made the point that on a technical matter like this, the professional advice of the ecologists, both in-house and those of NRW, we do follow their advice and feel that as officers that our policies, national policies in respect of biodiversity, have been adhered to, and this is policy compliant. I think that some of the points raised by the ward member in terms of its proximity to the neighbouring building and potential for overbearing, again, that's covered in the office report, and I've tried to address that in the presentation as well. And we do believe that there are mitigating factors why that gable end is not an overbearing development. When stood in the garden, as for members that have been there, there is view existing of the gable end of the existing dwelling. yes, the proposed extension would come further to that, but it's not considered that that provision is unacceptably overbearing, that would fail to preserve existing and acceptable standards of amenity, and that there is mitigation as to why it wouldn't cause unacceptable harm to third-party privacy. And similarly, the distances in terms of privacy standards to the old school building are fully in line with the sort of standards we would apply for any development and privacy, particularly habitable rooms to habitable rooms. So I hope I've covered members' points there. If there's anything further, please, I'd like to clarify if there's anything you need to help inform your decision, but hopefully I've covered all of the points that have been raised.
Thank you, Andrew. And before I bring Ben back in, because you've got the opportunity to sum it up anyway, can I just confirm that everybody who wishes to speak has now spoken? Okay, right, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make the point that had the original planning conditions been met for the development, the trees that would have been planted for that development would have to be removed for this extension to be built, as I understand it. So it's an awkward situation where the previous development didn't meet its conditions, and therefore that's somehow allowing this development to have an easier ride because fewer changes are needed to be made to the site in order to build the extension. But that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I would have to sort of slightly politely disagree with that. If the planting had been followed and an application then came in to fell those, provide the extension and provide planting elsewhere, I think the important point is that not just the original is always the only acceptable solution. In this case, the biodiversity mitigation strategy that's been put forward has had regard to the aspirations and the requirements of the original. Yes, it's different, it's an alternative, the planting is provided, but the important point is that the original approval is not the sole acceptable solution there for maintaining that dark corridor. Had it been, then our ecologists and those employed with NRW wouldn't be advising us that the impact is acceptable. They would still maintain an objection that there was only one solution, that's not been met, this is unacceptable. That's clearly not the position. An alternative is proposed that will provide planting. The safeguards are in there, like I said, to ensure that planting is A, carried out, B, maintained should it fail. And so whilst it's different to the original approval, my advice would be that the issues that the developer had in terms of his own compliance with the original has not affected this officer recommendation to you. It would be the same had those trees been planted and now somebody was proposing to remove them and provide them elsewhere. The consideration is the same. The impact on the bats is the same, and like I said, I repeat, the advice that we've received from professional ecologists is that those developers' wrongdoings, if you want to call it that, have not resulted in us being put in a position where we feel like we have to recommend approval. It's still got to satisfy all those tests, and that is the advice to us. And that's our recommendation to you, to approve on that basis.
Thanks for that, Andrew.
Right, on the basis of that then, I've got nobody else indicating that they wish to speak. We have obviously a recommendation for approval. Can I have somebody, Councillor Powell?
I'll propose that we accept it.
Somebody second that? Councillor McKenna, okay. Can we have the voting function up, please, Richard? Can you vote now then, please?
So that's been approved.
Thank you, Joe. We'll now move on to the next item, item 4.3, which is the revisiting of DM 2022-00696. Members will recall that at last meeting we resolved to refuse the application against officer recommendation. The procedure is that this has to come back to us for us to confirm or otherwise that that is the case, and in the case of refusal to agree the reasons for refusal, which are set out on the first section of the new report. I should point out that that report does still say approve. That is a typo. That should say refuse. But Phil, you're presenting this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll keep it brief. Chair's basically summed up what I was going to say, really.
I thought I had, but
apologies for the typo. Yeah, it should say recommendation refuse. It should have shifted to reflect the members' resolution at the last meeting. So the 3 reasons for refusal are set out on page 39. Obviously, the recommendation from officers was to approve. Members can still approve, in theory, the application if they're minded to. Just to put the context there for your decision today. But the reasons for refusal are clearly set out, 1, 2, and 3, in terms of relating back to policy, in terms of what members' concerns were in relation to policy DES 1, its design, scale, location. Policy at EP1 in terms of impact on the neighbouring property, and there was concern that it didn't comply with policy 8.6 given its scale and location, so all linking back to policies. So obviously we'll leave that for members to reflect on and vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Does anybody wish to bring up any points on this? Anybody wish to revisit any of it? Can I ask if everybody then is happy with the reasons for refusal as set out? Yeah, everybody happy with that? Okay, so the voting function can come up. I just note your battery's running down, Jan, so thanks for letting us know. So the recommendation following last month's meeting is for refusal. Can you now vote for what you wish and submit the vote now?
So that's been refused.
Thank you, Joe. So that's the refusal confirmed. In that case, then, there's just 1 or 2 other little bits and pieces that we want to mention to you. A couple of times a year, if we can do it, we have a design tour. The idea of that is to go around and visit various decisions that we've made, to see them in the flesh, so to speak. We're looking to try and do that on the 25th, I think, Tuesday the 25th of this month. It'll be a morning, probably up until about 1 o'clock, just simply so we can get the minibus. So if anybody's got any particular site that they would like us to visit, if they could contact Craig very, very, very soon, because we're just populating the itinerary now. The other thing is that we have always had a Christmas meal as a committee. We're looking to do that around about the 16th, probably, is it 16th of December? Yeah, Friday the 16th of December. So we'll be letting you know where that is. We do have a favourite venue for that,